Welcome back.
Hi. Who are you?
I'm Mia Schachter. I'm a writer, consent educator, intimacy coordinator, artist, musician, performer, friend, pet parent,
The
cancer,
hyphens. The
cancer,
hyphens.
cancer, sun, Scorpio, moon, Libra rising.
Emphasis on Scorpio moon. Do you feel complete, Mia? Shall I go in? Does that feel complete for you? Just want to
Yes.
acknowledge. I just want to acknowledge.
Here's what I'll add. They, them.
Okay, we'll circle back to that. Somebody look up if they them is in the dictionary. Just kidding. I'm Riston Roberts. I'm also a consent educator. I'm also an intimacy coordinator, and I'm also a whore. And I don't know, restorative practices facilitator. What else do I do? I'm a sex coach. My pronouns are she and they because I am the most toxic. That's it. Welcome to.
I have a love-hate relationship with the she-theys.
Oh,
Sorry.
me too. No, absolutely. Yeah.
Welcome to
You're doing it wrong.
I forgot the twink part. I'm
Oh,
the twink. Well, I'm so much the twink that last night I was Timothée Chalamet for Halloween for the 4th year in a row. I repeated my outfit from last year because I could not find another recognizable outfit for myself. And dare I say, I looked super hot.
I was like, you don't have to say it. I will just say it for you. Mia looked crazy hot. Yeah. It's giving me complicated feelings. That's the level of hot we're talking about. Yeah, it's great. I was a biblically accurate angel, which is to say that I wore a halo, angel wings, and I glued googly eyes all over my face and my chest.
You also looked super hot.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it went over well at the Hollywood Bowl. People were like, "Are you a biblically accurate angel?"
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was fun.
And you saw Boy Genius.
I did see Boy Genius, yes.
Which I think exactly 67% of our listenership is extremely jealous to hear
and
that.
the rest of them were there. Yeah.
Right.
I was like, this literally so many people were there. And I was just like, this is the gayest crowd I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Big lesbian energy. Yeah.
What a dream.
I said there's like a specific genre of music. I don't know of those three singers what all of their proclivities are. Because I'm not in my Tiger Beat era anymore. I don't even know if you know what Tiger Beat is. The point is,
don't.
Oh yeah, so this is like the late millennials or the early millennials. The old millennials, we used to do this thing called magazines. And in the magazines were pictures of all of the heartthrobs. They were like Us Weekly, but like for teeny boppers about like Jonathan Taylor Thomas and like whomever. Anyway, the point
Queer
is
icon.
yes,
JTT.
yes. There's a specific genre of music that like is very lesbian coded and yet the performers are not themselves lesbians, which is really fascinating.
Like Avril Lavigne and
yeah, or like who's the one who
Michelle
does
Branch.
Yes, and even like I'm not going to sing on this podcast, Mia, but there's the suddenly I see.
You just said you
I know.
weren't gonna sing.
I lied.
I'm so glad.
I lied. Yeah, I don't know. Well,
yeah, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, again, I'm older than dirt. Yeah. Someone right now is in their car, in their Subaru, screaming the name of this artist, punching the steering wheel, and shaking their oat milk latte out of its mason jar because of this conversation.
Wait, what did you say was the most bisexual drink you'd ever heard of?
Okay, not even bisexual. I went and got coffee with my sister, who's 24, the love of my fucking life, and this was in Soho, and I was like, yeah, can I get like a hot oat milk latte or some shit? I don't know. And she was like, can I get an iced matcha latte with cow's milk? Oh, yeah. And I slow motion turned to her and I said, that is the drink of a woman who eats pussy only in the context of a threesome where a man is present. And and she fell to the ground because she'd never been read so hard in her life. I'm insistent. I'm one of 5 children. I am insistent that somebody else is gay. I'm also the oldest. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Somebody
How
else.
could they not be?
I can't. Anyway,
Well, also, I mean, are we allowed to talk about
my family.
her? I don't
Sure.
want to
Oh
like
my God, are you
say,
kidding? She has a
well,
Leo moon. She'd be thrilled if we talked about
okay.
her.
All right. Well, I just, when you were like talking about girls who kiss girls for for what? Like for kicks or for
Queer baiting. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and then I said, like, what is it to be bisexual if not to like kissing girls? Like
Also,
that's,
like,
I don't know what else it is.
I would also like to venture that perhaps if you are a heterosexual woman, or maybe even a gay man, I don't know, somebody who just like doesn't kiss women that often, please try it because you're
Mm,
missing out. It's the fucking jam. Like, you don't even have to, you can just stop there. It's great.
yeah, right. You don't have to do anything else. I
No.
mean, the girl that I'm kissing these days is such a good kisser, and she told me that I'm a dreamy kisser, and I was like,
Ugh.
whoa, I'm filing that away for like a rainy day. That's gonna come out and bring me lots of cheer.
I just want to let you know that in my head, you're making out on like a heritage quilt. It is
Mm,
raining. You're in a cabin, and I'm watching this pillow talk. And it's not.
mm.
It's I'm not gonna like do myself to it, but I'm enjoying it. I don't want to. Just to be clear, Mia and I have a platonic but relationship. I love them deeply. In the beginning of the relationship, I was like, to be queer is to be like, what is this, right? And I think we both quickly came to the conclusion it was a comradeship, friendship, colleagueship, whatever.
Yes. I mean, I also had to ask those questions, especially because being your friend is so affirming in a gender sense. And sometimes I think I'm like, well, then I would like to have sex with that person, you know, like I want to be your boyfriend.
Right.
But it just means that you see me and that's it.
Oh,
And that's really nice.
that's nice.
Okay. Well,
I guess we should have a podcast now and stop like
yeah, I
hitting
think
on each
we're
other slash talking about my sister. Boy,
Yeah, and the girl that I'm dating who I have not yet asked if it's okay for me to talk about on this show. Um,
you did or did not ask?
I have not. I have not yet. I mean, I'm not using her name and I'm not
No.
like sharing, super personal details. I think for the most part, I've just shared how much I'm enjoying smooching her and when
And
she makes me steak.
it's referenced as anonymous female partner in your FBI file as of right now, based on this. Or for
Little
you,
do
I
they
guess
know.
your Mossad file. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, today we wanted to talk about uh instances where consent is um not the priority when that's fine or even good.
Yeah, like we've talked about like triaging, like emotional triage, and it's like sometimes I would argue consent is less important than other things that might be more important at in a certain circumstance.
You mean
Yeah.
like intervening?
Yeah, like for me, an example that comes to mind a lot is being in recovery, that sometimes I have a friend who was sharing with me a story of one of his sponsees relapsed or like stopped taking his medication for bipolar, I believe, and
Mhm.
was very manic, like literally like barefoot in the street, screaming and throwing rocks at
Mm,
cars, and like would not willingly go to
right.
hospitalization or some sort of institutional treatment. And so there was like a level of we have to override this person's consent. Like, we
Right.
need to 5150 this person, which is an involuntary psych hold where they
Hmm.
unfortunately usually hopefully call medical help professionals in, but in certain cities it's the police who do it,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So yeah. But like that person's like life, right? Their physical safety is maybe more important than like getting consent,
Right.
especially when that person is possibly like not in their right state of mind.
Right. Yes. I think I have several examples. And help me not just list these examples by inserting your opinion and asking questions or whatever you want to do so that I'm not just blathering.
Okay.
Okay. So one example is yesterday I was hanging out with a new friend and a mosquito went on his arm and I slapped it
Oh,
without asking.
how was that received?
He was totally fine with it. And I apologized afterwards. I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't ask. He didn't seem bothered. The same thing happened a couple weeks ago to some where I slapped a mosquito on a new person and she was so appreciative. And I probably could do a better job of asking. And also, like, I think it's okay.
Well, it's a good example because you don't really have time to ask.
Exactly.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's
exactly.
like the mosquito lands on you. It's a millisecond before it's
right before it's eating you.
Right. And this isn't like a life or death situation, but it's like,
right.
You know, based on Mia's experience in the world, you've decided that this person probably doesn't want a mosquito on them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I personally hate being eaten by mosquitoes and I get eaten really bad. So like if someone were to do that to me, I'd be grateful, which is not always a good indicator of whether or not someone else will be grateful. I have a pretty gentle mosquito slap.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, how hard's the slap? Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't do it if it was on their face.
Right. I, as an aside, if any of our listeners have a explanation for this, mosquitoes don't like me. And I cannot
that's what
figure
this
out
guy
why.
said yesterday, my new friend. And I was like, fuck off.
It's not a humble brag. I'm concerned I have a medical condition. I'm like, why? I have O negative blood type, which they supposedly love, but I just like I don't really get bitten.
I mean, I've heard that it's like it can be I've heard that like if you eat bananas, it repels mosquitoes.
I don't eat bananas. I'm allergic to them.
Oh.
I don't know. Anyway.
Well, who knows? They love me. They love me. If there's one mosquito around, I am torn to bits.
Oy.
Okay, I have some, I mean, I love the smaller the example, the better. So the mosquito was the smallest one that I have. I have some larger ones. Two that happened to me recently, and then one from, and I feel like I need like a
yeah,
Ugly
okay.
Betty. Well, I'll share the one from Ugly Betty first, okay? Also, by the way, I finished Ugly Betty, so we will no longer be discussing Ugly Betty after today. Yeah, thank goodness. I am about to start the latest season of Big Mouth.
I was like, what's the show? Are you going to go back and watch Cheers? What are you going to watch? You're going to watch
No,
Prius
it's
Company.
Total tangent here, but I keep on being like, it would be a much better use of your time to like watch documentaries or watch like classical movies and like educate yourself on like film history or whatever. And I'm like, I'll just do it when I'm done with Ugly Betty. Ugly Betty's over, and of course, like the newest season of Big Mouth is out. So I'm like, well, I'll just do it after I watch Big Mouth. I'm like, Jesus, like there's never going to be a shortage of television, even amidst months of strikes. Like there's never going to be a shortage of television to binge because also we have television from like the last 100 years, 60 years, 80 years, whatever. Like there's always going to be more TV watch. Anyway, okay. In Ugly Betty, her boss, Daniel, gets sort of like absorbed into a cult. And he doesn't really recognize what's happening. His life kind of gets taken over by this. He gets obsessed. They're taking his money. They're using him to access other wealthy people. And it's really clouding his ability to do his job. It's clouding him in a lot of ways and ruining a lot of his relationships because the person who brought him into the cult is like purposefully making him paranoid about the people around him. So there's basically like an intervention essentially, and this whole like there's like essentially like an ayahuasca like journey type of thing. He like drinks some tea, he like sees his dead wife, and that gets interrupted by this intervention organized by Betty and his mother, Claire. So, this was an instance. Oh, no, it wasn't that though. It was that they were trying to figure out if the cult was taking his money. And so Betty knew his password to his computer.
She's like his assistant or something.
She was his assistant, but at this point is no longer, but still knows all that stuff. So they break into his like bank statements to see if this company is taking his money. He's obviously very upset. He feels very violated and he no longer trusts them. And so anyway, I'm watching this and I'm like, these two are obviously really violating this person's consent. I say this as a person who recently got surveilled by a foreign government. So it's very violating. I understand this. And I would be very upset if someone like broke into my computer and read anything on here or whatever. But I'm also watching this and I'm thinking like, there's a way that we can see and that they can see that he is not in his right mind and that other people are controlling and manipulating him. And so they violate his consent in order to protect him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think about, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but like my parents were never that interested in me, to be honest, but that people's parents sometimes like read their journals because they don't believe, kids don't, teenagers, young teenagers, whatever, don't like disclose all of the truth. And they also are like not super capable of knowing everything they're getting into. And so I think there's an argument sometimes where it's like, yes, it's very violating and perhaps even fucked up, but also like, if you think your kid's up to something, like, I don't know, sometimes you have to like break the rules to like keep your kid safe, or in this instance,
right.
this guy.
Well, and of course there's like different circumstances I'm thinking about, there's like fucked up parents doing that, in really fucked up ways. And then there's like, my kid is not talking to me. They seem to be, let's say, on drugs or like they're hanging out with like a much, much, much older man. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't think it's right to read someone's journal. And I'm not a parent and I can imagine situations in which you're like, I don't know what else to do. And I'm like afraid for my child's safety. You just gave an example before we started recording of like people getting kidnapped to go to boarding school and how like, and I dated someone whose parents did that to him and it was so traumatizing to him. And yet I'm also hearing you say like some people would not have gone willingly and really did need to be there. And your summation of that was like it saved their life.
Well, I went to one of those boarding schools. I went to like a bad girl boarding school, like lockdown for 2 years in very Northern California. Yeah. And a lot of people were brought there, like woke up in the middle of the night, like got thrown in the back of a van. And yeah, I'm sure that was really traumatizing to them, but also like, being a Jane Doe in a morgue and your parents identifying you is probably pretty traumatizing too, I would imagine. So I don't know, not to be super grim, but yeah, I think these are all like examples we've given that are kind of like, it's sort of like, I mean, the mosquito, not as much, I guess, although you could make an argument it is, but they're about like this person's like safety and like life, like they're continuing to live sort of trumps, right? Like what is right or proper, right? In terms of like boundaries and respect and consent. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this also brings up, and I'm not super well versed in this, but like the difference between ethics and moral, ethics and morality, where like what's ethical is not always what's moral and what's moral is not always what's ethical. And I think everyone seems to have a kind of different version of that or like different definitions for those words, but like okay, like for example, it's not ethical supposedly for like a doctor to date a patient. But I don't know that morals have anything to do with that. Like I'm not sure that there's any, I don't think morality is really part of that. Like I was watching that show Shrinking, and Harrison Ford, who's in his 70s, dates his doctor who's in her 70s. And like, yeah, she's his doctor, but it's like, these are two grown ass adult professionals who like met this way. And I don't really think it's for anyone to say. I think it would be different if it was like, I don't know, an older doctor and a younger, or like, you know, and yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there are people who really want these things to be super cut and dry. It's like, if you're a doctor, you don't date your patient, right? If you're a teacher, you don't date your student. And I'm like, I would so much rather that we have like complex, nuanced conversations about power dynamics and about ethics than make unequivocal statements about like, this is never okay.
Yeah, and I think the thing specifically to that relationship, the Harrison Ford, and I forget the actress's name, but she's great. She's in fucking everything. She's like been on TV since the 70s, I swear to God. But that he's a very well-resourced person and she's his GP. So like he can go get another doctor. This isn't like some insane, like some like really specific specialist, and he lives in the middle of fucking nowhere and he's part of like a
And he has
research
cancer
team.
and she's about to save his life. And
Yeah. It's
yeah,
like,
and
it's
he's
not...
a therapist, so like he's not, you know, he's also like well versed in these dilemmas.
Yeah.
You know.
You would hope.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So I want to share two examples of things that have happened to me where people have not prioritized consent, and I've really liked it.
That's, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So one was that I was working with this new producer who has since become a friend and who owes me a text, by the way, because he completely bailed and like didn't even say anything about the last
Where
time we were
are
supposed to
you?
hang.
Are you
Yeah. Hey,
listening? He posted on Instagram today.
I'm
He's
gonna
still
come
alive.
after him.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come after him. Okay, so I texted him the night before. I was like, what time do you want me to come over tomorrow? He was like, 8 a.m. We're going to the beach. And I was like, what? I thought we were making music.
You
But
should
I also,
disclose your feelings about the beach to the audience so that they
yes,
know why
I'm about to.
Yeah.
So this was new for me in terms of a producer, working with a music producer, but I also was like, sure, whatever, I'm along for the ride. Let's see what happens. Okay, y'all should know about me that I'm a California baby and I hate the beach. If you've never seen a picture of me, I have the whitest skin perhaps ever. And I burn really easily. My like sensory stuff shows up as I hate sunscreen. I hate the texture, a feeling of sunscreen. I hate being wet. I hate sand, the feeling of sand. I honestly I just hate West LA also. Like I grew up on the west side and I'm just like I don't want to go over there.
That I can get on board with. Fuck the west side.
Yeah, I hate the sensation of walking on sand. Like nothing about the beach appeals to me. I will go look at it and be like, wow, water.
Yeah.
Like
So you're like,
that's
you
it.
like a restaurant overlooking the ocean situation.
Great,
But yeah.
love it, perfect.
It's the
I don't
beach.
want to go near it. I hate cold water. I don't like the sensation of like I've been to the beach and the water dried and now there's sand all over my body. Sand in my puss, like no thank you. And then there's sand on everything for days. Okay, that's my rant about the beach. I don't understand, it makes no sense to me. Okay, so 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 he said meet me at 8, we're going to the beach. And I was like, listen, happy to like follow along, and you know you're taking the reins, like this is great, but you should know I will go with you to the beach. I'm not going to get in the water. I probably haven't been in the water in like a decade. And he sent me this voice memo that was like, I hear you, I respect you, and I'm not going to force you to get in, except maybe I am, and I'll ask for forgiveness after. I loved this. I like cracked up laughing. I was like beaming with, because also people who know what I do don't talk to me like this. So there was like a little bit of like, whoa, cool, like this is the real world a little bit, you know? Okay, next day I meet him at his house. He drives us to the beach.
This is at 8 a.m.
This is at 8 a.m.
Yeah, that's the part that's non-consensual for me, but go
I
on.
think it was 8 a.m. It was early. It was early. It might have been 8:30, but yeah, it was early. We go to the beach. I put on the sunscreen. And we like sit on some towels and he like guides us through a little like meditation thing. And then we started to like walk into the water. And I was like visibly upset. And I was like, all right, man, like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. But like, I'm not going to dunk. I'm not going to dunk. And then Risen, I got in the water. He like started floating, you know, he like plops on his back and he's like, this is God, man. And I'm like, okay. And I dunked in the water. I dunked in the water. It was so exhilarating. I wanted to do it again and again and again. I didn't want to get out of the water. I was like, it was so healing. It was so healing, like with my relationship to the water. You know, part of this is like the sensory stuff. I also felt like forced to kind of like the beach because I grew up in California. We had to go for camp and stuff like that. But I also have had a couple experiences where I at least felt like I was drowning, like getting, you know, like boogie boarding and like not knowing which way was up. And then my sister, when we were very little, like she like pushed me down into the water in our pool and I couldn't get up and I thought I was drowning. Yeah. So anyway, it was very, very healing. It was so exciting. And I was so grateful. I was grateful for the pressure that he applied on me to get into the water. Yeah.
I feel like this is I don't want to pull us away, but I feel like this is an example of where like I know this is an extreme leap. You like the small examples, I like the big examples.
Yeah.
Like I talk about this in BDSM a lot. Like we are playing the game of consent. Like the rule of the game is we're playing with consent. And this is sort of an example of that, of being like, you at any time could have been like, fuck this, I'm not doing this. But the sort of like playful, coercive thing, it was like a little bit of a dynamic-y kind of play you guys were doing. And that's part of the delight, is sort of the, you know, and that's like the play we did when we were kids too. It's you're the monster and I'm the dragon, right? Like I've assigned you a role and we're doing this, and it allows you to kind of play. But like with BDSM specifically, like we're playing the game of one of us doesn't have consent. We're playing the game like in CNC or like, you know, but even though like I still have a way to at any point be like, I'm actually not getting in the ocean. Right. Like, but that's the game. And that's why we like it.
Yes. And the relinquishing of control, which is really freeing. CNC is consensual non-consent. So it's like rape fantasies and things like that. Also, you know, he wasn't physically forcing me into the ocean. He was applying gentle but firm, like mental emotional pressure on me to have an experience.
And playfully. Yes. Yeah, which I think is important. There's sort of this like, I'll ask for forgiveness after, but it's in the guise of play. And if at any point you had turned to him and been like, bro, he would have been like, he would have backed off, you know?
Of course. And I knew that to be true. Also, the dynamic of like producer, songwriter, I was prepared to like let him dom me a little bit in that context, you know?
As somebody who doesn't make music, is a lot of that relationship sort of about him kind of pushing your edges anyway, or being like, let's try this, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, you know, try it this way, or like do it again, but this way. It's very like director, actor kind of director, actor, writer, you know, so it's kind of like, yeah, it's not like his vision. It's my vision. I'm writing this musical. But he's pushing. Yeah, that is what I have agreed to. Okay. The second example is that I went to this vampire dyke party a few weeks ago, with my friend.
Not
I
a
think
Halloween party, to be clear.
no, it was, I
Yes.
mean, you know, it was like a pre-Halloween, like October vampire themed dyke party at Honey's Ellen. And I went with my friend, and this guy walked in who I recognized because we had matched on Field like a year ago or something, and then never talked because I think I decided that I didn't want to date cis men at the time. And he beelines for my friend. And I was like, oh, you guys know each other. Then he looks at me and I'm like, hey, and he recognizes me too. And then we like tell my friend, oh yeah, like we matched on Field and never talked. So then this cute girl comes in. We all talk for a second. She ends up talking to my friend for a little while, and I'm talking to this guy. So we kind of faction off into these duos. At a certain point, I say to this guy, I know we hardly know each other, but would you be willing to wingman for me right now? And he's like, yeah, what do you want? What do you need? And I was like, this girl that my friend is talking to, I think is really cute. And he was like, yeah, I got you. So we like we like create a circle, you know, I like headbutt in the direction, like, let's like scoot this way. So we all start talking. She then goes outside for a cigarette. This guy says to me, do you want me to go tell her that you think she's cute and ask if she's interested? And before I can respond, he's gone. Like I take a breath and I'm sure I smile, you know, and
like,
blush.
what were the nonverbals there?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm sure that I was blushing. I'm sure that I was like smiling and kind of excited by the idea. He clocked that and was gone. So he asked if I wanted him to do that and did not wait for permission, took care of it, came back, she said, hell yeah, absolutely. She comes back in and I'm being sort of blocked by these other people. He comes over to them and says, hey guys, like you're all cock blocking Mia right now. And so they move out of the way. I end up talking to this girl over at the bar. Anyway, whatever. One thing leads to another, and then we made out all night. And now we're seeing each other.
Adorbs.
So cute.
It also makes me think if I had this situation in this class that I'm in where it was interesting. The workshop leader is a cis white guy, and I don't know, I think he's probably 50, who was like put in this center and sort of made to do this exercise. And he got very embarrassed in the middle of it. And he said, I feel like I'm taking up too much space. I feel like because I have all this privilege in this space, it's inappropriate for me to be like centered in this exercise. And he started crying. And I told him later, because he ended up, the facilitator wasn't taking a break, and he sort of like topped her and was like, you need to take a break. And she was like, and she's a woman of color. She was like, okay, we're going to take a break now. And I pulled him aside and I was like, that was right use of privilege. And I feel like sort of the story you're telling too is this thing of sort of like using this power thing of being like the cis guy in the group to be like, we're all moving over here now. I'm taking control of the situation. It's like the right use of that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I see what you mean. And I think, you know, one of the things, like when we were texting about what we wanted to talk about this week, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we touch on is like, there's no right or wrong here. Like, had this guy prioritized consent and waited for me to respond, like that wouldn't have been wrong. And honestly, he took a risk in not waiting for my permission. You know, my producer took a risk in talking to me like that and telling me that he was going to push me to get into the water.
Slapping a new friend because they had a mosquito on their arm.
Slapping a new friend, yes, is a risk to some degree. And I think, you know, I've talked to friends, like especially friends who like struggle with depression. And like I struggle with like bouts of depression and anxiety. And like, you know, I'm a person who's like, if I will not want to burden anybody, especially when I'm depressed. So I will say like, no, I'm okay. And what I really want and what would be best for me is for a friend to actually intrude, show up at my house and be like, we're going up for a walk.
This reminds me of, I literally have just like posted on my IG, and it's way less dramatic, I hope, than it is. But I've just been like, I'm fucked this week. If you're trying to reach out to me and I'm not responding, I'm in my house drowning in schoolwork. Please just come by my house. Feel free to bring me a coffee. If you're in my neighborhood, just come by. And people have been doing it. You were here one time. You came by, took me for a walk. You're like, get in the car, and then or what, go for a walk. And then my friends Lauren and Danielle showed up, and it's like it was so. And I would, if they had been like, well, what if we come by this time? What if we do? Does that work for you? It's like I'm not capable of even having those kind of conversations because I'm so overburdened that it's like somebody just showing up and taking the initiative. It makes me think too of our dynamic sometimes when we go like we'll meet up under the guise of like going to the coffee shop or going to the dog park, and then I just sort of sit in your car with you as you do like
Yeah.
15 things. And I love, you used the term with the producer, along for the ride. It's like
Yeah.
I love being, you know, as a fucking pillow princess bottom pig, even in my friendships, I love being just like bottom out,
We're
sub,
going. Yeah.
yeah, sub out. I'm like, I've said to you multiple times, I'm like, we could drive to fucking Mexico right now, I don't give a shit. Like I like somebody making those, and that's not true obviously in a lot of parts of my life. I'm very much like in charge and making decisions, but it's in my
Right.
friendships and things like I like being like, I don't actually need to make any decisions. You don't need to check in with me. You can trust me to tell you if you've crossed a boundary, right? Or
Right.
if I now need to go home or whatever.
Right. It's a little bit of that like get in loser, we're going shopping kind of energy.
Yeah, which is hilarious. I don't know.
Yeah.
I definitely, my gender is Regina George. That's why I
Yes,
was
that's
smiling to
100%.
myself.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, and these are also things that you can ask people when they're not in that state, right? Like what would be helpful to you? Like I'm telling you right now, obviously, so now you know. But like, but again, it's a risk. Like for someone, you know, I have a friend who will never ask for help, and she won't let me come to her apartment because she says she like still hasn't unpacked, and she's been there for like 2 years. She like still hasn't fully unpacked. And I have had the thought of like, Meg, tell me your address. I shouldn't have used your name. Tell me your address. Because there's only one Meg in the world. You know, tell me your address. I'm gonna show up, and I'm gonna, or not even to say it, right? To like be like, knock, knock. Hi, I'm helping you unpack. I am not judging you because I've known you for literally 30 years. We met in kindergarten. Like, I am going to help you unpack your apartment. And I haven't done it. But the thought has crossed my mind. And I think there's like relationships with certain amounts of trust, with certain amounts of intimacy, with certain amounts of familiarity, where yes, you take a risk, and maybe you have an idea going into it, like what is the thing that they could say or do that would make me back off. But, you know, I think especially when people like won't ask for help or are really self-sacrificing, or have told you in the past, you know, this is what I need, like, yeah, just consent or permission are not always the thing to prioritize.
Yeah, it's like it's not it's not is the word like empirical number one hierarchical like golden calf of relationships. Like there's
Right.
Unfortunately, as you also alluded to with this thing of like there's no right and wrong way. It's like the tragic truth of human relationships is that like there's no like static way to orient. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just there's just gonna be fuck ups, and one day
Right.
I might slap a mosquito off somebody who's a devout Buddhist monk who never wants to talk to me
Right.
again.
Or a vegan. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you know, I think that there's like calculated risks that we can take. And I think a lot about this, like this empathy thing, like the common descriptor of empathy is like, you know, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And I think of like empathy, kind of adult empathy 2.0 is like knowing what I know about you. What do you feel right now? Or what do you need right now? But sometimes empathy 1.0 is what you have to fall back on, because you can't because you don't know. So it's
Well,
like, well, I know what I would need in this situation. And so I'm going to go with that until I'm told that that's wrong.
yeah, and you gave a couple of really great examples of situations in which like you didn't have a lot of relational history with these
No,
people. So it's
that's
like
right.
I'm kind of coming from my own experiences, you know what I mean, based on how
Right.
I feel about mosquitoes and how I feel about making out with people I just met or whatever the fuck
That's
it
right.
is, you know?
Right. And I appreciated that these people took initiative and took this risk. And I could have been mad at them, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I wasn't. Um, I think this sort of leads us into this other thing around like that often well, it's like two-pronged, right? There's
Mm.
like people there are lots and lots of people in the world. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you probably value consent pretty highly. I value consent pretty highly. You, Risden, value consent pretty highly. But there are lots and lots of people in this world who do not.
Mm-hmm.
And we still have to contend with them. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't also them not valuing consent does not necessarily make them bad people. They may be
Right.
valuing other things.
Right. It might just be like it's not in their vernacular, it's not, they're just other things they value more. They maybe haven't been exposed to some of this stuff, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah. It's not like they hate consent, you know.
No,
We're not
right.
talking
But
about incels specifically. Like we're
no, no,
talking
no,
about,
no.
yeah.
No. I mean, I was talking in class today, like someone brought up that they didn't want to teach consent in the context of like teaching consent to incarcerated people like in a
Hmm.
prison
Hmm.
because they were like because consent is so inaccessible to them.
Mm.
I don't want to be teaching them something that they like don't truly have any access to. I thought that was really interesting because I have an incarcerated pen pal who I've had for several years now, who I was introduced to by a friend who does horticultural therapy in prisons and jails. Like she met him and she introduced us, and I sent him one of my workbooks and he was like so all about it that I sent him another one to give to a friend. And
Yeah,
then
please.
no, and then he gave it to a friend and he was like telling me that his friend was so into it also.
I think it's, I don't want to disagree with it was a student who said this to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think we can bring things to people's attention even if they don't have full access to them. Like, you know, just because you're in a situation against your consent, you know, or where your
Right.
consent is not respected, that doesn't mean that you can't be interested in this topic.
Yeah, I agree. But I also really hear what this person was saying was it was like this is something that I mean, what I got out of that was like that prioritizing consent when you look at it through that lens is actually a privilege.
Mm. Hmm.
Like being able to have autonomy
Yeah.
is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, beyond that, I think there's, I've been seeing some like rhetoric online around like what's going on in Gaza right now that like I didn't consent to my tax dollars being used to fund war. I agree with this sentiment. I am not against this sentiment. But what comes up for me when I see that is I'm like, you're speaking gibberish to these people. Like they don't know what you're talking about. They don't care about consent.
Mm-hmm.
Consent is not on their radar, whether it's Netanyahu, whether it's anyone in the IDF, whether it is our American, Congress people, legislators. Like they are not prioritizing consent. They think that they're acting in the best interest of, the greater good of the American people, of whatever, probably the Israeli people. Like consent is not something that they are concerning themselves with in terms of like where your money goes.
Right. Right. And as we spoke to, that's actually not you don't consent on where your tax dollars get spent.
Right. That's not part of the arrangement.
That's not how democracy, air quotes, works. Is you supposedly elect an official who represents your interests. That's so
right.
once you've cast a ballot, that's
That's
kind of
it.
it. You can influence that person by calling them and putting pressure on them, or there are other things, but like you don't actually have, your consent is not part of the equation when they make decisions. You gave them the authority to make decisions on your behalf. That's their job.
Right, right, right. And there's various reasons for that. I mean, I think, also like I also didn't consent to my tax dollars being used to like fix pavement in Bel Air.
I'm just laughing because I literally parked my cars in the Hollywood Hills, and I parked my car over the most shittily filled pothole I've ever seen in my life. And I literally said to someone I was with, I was like, this is some New Orleans shit right here. Cause like New Orleans potholes are notorious. And I was like, this is fucking Hollywood Hills. Like, y'all got money up here. What the fuck is this? Anyway.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, and then there's all kinds of things that my tax dollars don't go to that I wish they did go to, like gender affirming surgeries, healthcare, So anyway, I think what comes through to me with that is like, don't waste your energy trying to argue that consent is not taking place with people who don't care about consent, right? Like to recognize when that's the case and like save your energy.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to this larger thing that we've kind of talked about, where it's like, you use the term pruning your echo chamber, where it's sort of like, somebody said to me the other day, they're like, oh, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm like, yeah, we do a lot of that. Like there's a lot. And I think you and I are a little more interested in perhaps expanding that circle and having conversations with people who aren't as like in the leftist pillow talk sphere. And I'm thinking specifically about when you shadow supervised me on set, my first IC job, which was very recently, and it was last week, I think. And you kind of coached me, like, I'm not going to direct quote you here, but it was something along the lines of like, maybe don't use the word boundaries with the actors. I think it was something like, am I correct? Was it something like that?
It wasn't that. It was like you were looking for a term for like the boundary conversation. And I was like, unless someone has given you an indication that like this is in their vernacular, I would just say, hey, let's check in and like talk about where is okay to touch. Because what happens is that for anyone who is new to this kind of communication, there are buzzwords that they've heard that, like there are a lot of people who hear consent and boundary. I've had a director say to me, how long does this mushy gushy stuff take? So like when you're dealing with people like that and you say, let's have our boundary conversation, they're like, they just roll their eyes and they're like, I'm not this fragile. Okay. Like, please stop, babying me. Like I'm a grown ass adult. Or you'll deal with people who still will say like, I don't have boundaries, you can touch me anywhere, and I'm like, cool, so I can like stick my pinky up your nose.
That's always what I say to clients when I ask them what their boundaries are, and they're like,
I
no,
can
I'm good
poke you in the-
everywhere. I'm like, cool, so I can fuck you in the ass with my fist, and they're like, what? I'm like, okay, so let's try this conversation again.
Yeah, let's start over, back up. Yeah, it's my whole hand inside.
Yeah, that's what you came here for, right? Yeah,
right. So yeah, so I think what this is really, I mean, I think it's a form of like of code switching. I think other people would like call it masking in a way. I think it's like learning to speak the language of the people that you're talking to so that you are understood. Like that is ultimately the goal, right? So like I try to, in this program that I'm teaching right now, the consent educator program, like we're at the point where a lot of people are like, what do I call my Instagram? What do I call my brand? And I'm like, just over and over recommending that people avoid using the word consent. I'm like, if I could do it again, I would not use the word consent. I mean, I was brainstorming new handles just this morning. What did I say? Boundaries are gay.
Yeah. They were so funny. Hold on, I have to look. I'm sure they're like so cancelable. What were they? Boundaries are gay. What I'm going for now. Oh, I said mine was at your boundaries don't matter, all underscores and 69.
Yeah, boundaries are gay. I mean, at first I was like queering boundaries, and then I was like, ew, like I want to barf. And then
my brain's out.
And then I was like, boundaries are gay is really funny because it's sort of like, taking back like gay as a slur, making fun of people by making fun of how they make fun of us in a way.
It's too
you know?
meta. It's too
Yeah,
meta.
it's too meta. But also like if that's not very professional.
Sure. Well, okay, so but I think what's interesting is that by me coming into an actor conversation and being like, we're going to talk about boundaries and consent, I
Yeah.
immediately there's some walls going up, and
Yes.
there's some scripts happening in people's heads where it's like, this is really for the actress, and to make sure that, and the guy has to be like, I'm not a creep, I'm not Weinstein, right? It's like this
Whatever she's
immediate.
comfortable with.
Right, exactly. This immediate binary happening thing happens. And if what I want is to have a conversation about boundaries and consent, there are other
You
ways.
cannot. That's exactly right.
Yes, there are other ways to articulate that. Like we were brainstorming this and I was like, let's use actor language and maybe talk about let's just get like an idea of what's going to feel best to us so we can create the most chemistry for you guys on screen. Like even like using some sort of language that's more appealing to them, but we're having the same fucking conversation.
Exactly. I mean, I often say like we're kind of building a menu of touch so that anything not on the menu is off the table.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we're giving you sort of the equivalent of lines for you to like improv with. And what I have found is that explicit permission is really liberating. Like it really frees people up to play and explore. And like when I talk about it like that, we're building a container that you can play in safely. Like then people really understand. Whereas like if I start talking about boundaries and consent to like, someone who's been acting for 25 years, they're like, yeah, I'm not 7 years old. Like,
yeah, they're
don't
like,
therapize me.
This is my 30th sex scene. And
Yeah.
this is the first time I've had this conversation. So like, what are you doing? Right. What are we doing? Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I want to give some really concrete examples of like when other values can come into conflict. I'll give some like more general examples and then I'll get specific with consent. So like I have a value of my values of transparency and authenticity may come into conflict with my value of impact. So for example, I want to be transparent about the fact that I am pro porn and pro sex work and that I've worked on porn sets. But there are going to be instances in which me being transparent about that is going to reduce my potential impact. If I am talking to a group of parents, if I'm
like
talking
Nickelodeon is trying to hire you. Yeah.
Exactly. If I'm trying to get high, I don't really work with kids and I don't really go into schools, but like, let's say I wanted to do that and an elementary school was going to hire me to do like a consent, boundaries series of games for the kids, or even like a camp, right? And I am working with a camp, but I'm teaching the counselors. Yeah, like if certain parents found out that I do that, they would get me fired and then my impact would be reduced. So there are going to be instances in which I am going to be less transparent because I'm prioritizing my value of impact in that particular situation. So, I mean, do you have an example of this for yourself when your values are in conflict?
I was just thinking about this just happens all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why it feels like a new phenomenon where we feel entitled to everyone's entire life history. Like, if you were educated by teachers, like you didn't know about their personal lives, you know what I mean? You'd see them at the grocery store and be like, oh, you have like a life? This is crazy to me. Right. Or like politicians or famous people. It's like, I don't have any right to their private life. Like, I don't know. That's what it made me think of.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think there's like, in business, it becomes a little different where it's like transparency about business. But I can think about like, a value like let's look at values like justice and connection. So sometimes when I prioritize justice, I will push myself to advocate, to educate, to tell people when I think they're doing something harmful, racist, transphobic, fatphobic, etc. When I'm prioritizing connection, I have to increase my patience. I have to increase my tolerance for activation, often around exactly those same things. And so when I'm prioritizing connection with like, you know, my extended family, let's say, especially like in going home for Thanksgiving, I'm a little bit nervous about like if the conversation turns to Gaza. Like, but my plan is to go in prioritizing connection, which is going to get in the way of perhaps prioritizing what I believe to be justice.
This sort of brings in, and I'll be quick about this, but this idea that it's not an original theory. I forget who said it, but most conflict is people wanting two things at once that are in conflict with each other. So like if I simultaneously want justice and connection, that's going to create tension as opposed to just picking one to be 10% more important in this moment.
In
right.
this
Or like,
situation.
I want to be an A student. I also want to have relationships with my friends and I want to get 8 hours of sleep. It's like, that's, you know what I mean? Like I can't have all three of those at one time. I have to sort of put one on top of the other. Yeah.
I want to say I learned a lot about this stuff around values from Sarah, who runs Comprehensive Consent, Sarah Casper. I also learned from Minachi, my friend who does decolonized nonviolent communication. She talks about how like we all have these human needs. So this is different from values, but human needs such as like security, connection, community, safety, all these things. And conflict does not arise from the realm of needs. It arises in the realm of strategies.
Yes.
So it's how you go about achieving it that creates conflict, but like everyone has the same basic universal human needs. You know, we all need connection, we all need safety, we all need stability. Okay, so then when it comes to consent, whatever, we can consider examples of like, you know, I'm prioritizing impact over consent. I'm prioritizing, you know, this person's life over consent. Like I see them about to jump in front of a moving train. I'm not prioritizing consent right now. I'm pulling them out. Narcan administration, right? I'm not prioritizing consent when I'm administering Narcan. I'm prioritizing this person's life, their survival.
My friend just got strip search coming out of the New Orleans airport and felt really violated about it. And, you know, obviously you can argue their consent was overridden. I mean, they consented to ride the plane and this is part of the deal is that this can happen to you. But, you know, it's sort of like the trolley problem, right? It's like the safety of this plane and its other customers, whatever, people flying on the plane is actually a little bit more important than your discomfort with the situation. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, right. And then I think there's like you bring in like racial profiling into the mix and it gets like unbelievably more complicated.
She's even blonder than me, if you can believe it. This girl. She was wearing one of those bodysuits that snaps at the crotch and the snaps were setting it off. So they were like, she's got something in her vagina. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So she had to do like a full strip search. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that there's like, I wanted to really get into this, like this thing about looking at consent as like a value like many other values. Because I think that there's a way that I would imagine a lot of people think like consent is just the number one thing. It's the number one thing. It's the number one thing. And especially like with what I do, that they would assume that to me, it's the number one thing.
Yeah. And I definitely think I find myself in work situations and more specifically with myself, I often override my own consent for other needs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That like other values, like financial security. I might push myself past what I need to do or meet a deadline or show up for a client or, you know, those kind of things where I'll override my own consent, I feel like, or my own capacity. Yeah.
Totally. And I think that there's like instances when that's even the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, you know, like it's the right thing for me to follow through on a commitment that I made a lot of times, even though I would rather change my mind and not go. You know, just it's the right thing to push myself to go support my friend because they're playing a show and I told them I would go.
Yeah, it makes me think about taking communion at my aunt's funeral. It's like I'm not a practicing
Mm,
Catholic, but this is really important to my family. Like the being Catholic is like it's it's religious, but it's also cultural. It's this thing we all have in common. My aunt really valued her. This was the church that like my mother and aunts and uncles were like raised in, like out of respect to the church and to the priest. Like I'm gonna do
mhm,
communion. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
even though it's not being forced on me, I'm acquiescing willingly, but there's a little bit of a consent thing there. I'm not.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
yeah. The value of connection and of like respect for my family is more important
Yeah.
to me in this moment, and showing respect to my aunt, and also just not creating tumult at a time when we're all
Hmm.
dealing with grief. It's like, let's not, my needs are not as important, right? Like triage. I'm not going to make my need to make some fucking statement about the Catholic Church more important than the fact that like my cousin, her daughter is grieving here with her children, her
Yeah.
like 3-year-old son. Like that is more important, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree. I think there's like yeah, obviously I value consent. I think that there is I think it's important to have room for other values and to loosen up, you know, reject the rigidity around that. And I think there's a way that consent, unlike any other value, becomes extremely rigid, where people are like, no, there's one way to do this, and like there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. And if you're not valuing consent, then you're violating me. And it
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be the case with all kinds of other values like acceptance and compassion and community and connection
Honesty,
and
even
care,
honesty.
honesty, authenticity, like all these other kinds of values. It's so much more about um I don't know, like your way of doing it, what feels right to you, you know, how to be it's way more fluid. And there's this strange way that consent almost taps into this like mathematical robot
Mm,
brain.
yeah, and it's you know, this thing where things get turned into consent violations, or they get turned
Yep.
into you violated my consent, when it's like that's maybe not actually what happened. It becomes like very black and white, where it's like that's not,
Yeah.
or like for example, like we gave some examples of consent being violated where it's like that's maybe was like for the best or was
Right.
like necessary, and it's
Or I'm really grateful that this
mhm.
person was not prioritizing consent in that moment and like and took that risk that I the consent wizard like would like would be upset, you know.
I think that's really the thing that we're kind of putting our feet in here, is that like it's not that rigid, and that like there isn't a static truth or a static black and whiteness to this, that there's like something in the moment that we kind of have to dance with, and is maybe not always going to be received perfectly, even though we have best intentions and we're, I don't know.
Yeah, no, totally. I think also like something that really helps with this is like knowing how to check in after and like talk about your expectations or like give feedback or ask for feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I did not feel violated by this guy going and telling this cute girl that I was interested in her. I did not feel violated by that at all. However, I could check in afterwards. You know, like I could say after, like even to and I've said to him like thank you for doing that. I'm really glad and I feel like I have to give you credit.
Mm-hmm.
Um but yeah, like I don't know. In I'm thinking like in a sexual context, right? Like to like do something that you want to do, that you feel compelled to do in the moment. And then realizing like, oh, I didn't ask if that was okay. And then being able to, after the fact, go like, was that okay? Is there a way that you would want me to do that differently in the future or whatever? And if someone says, yeah, actually, I would prefer, that you not do that, or that you ask before you do that next time, not to have that mean rape. I'm just going to the extreme, but
no,
like,
exactly. But it's like,
yeah.
oh, my consent has been violated. It's like we're in, even in vanilla sex, we're in the world of play. And there's like this element of sort of pushing against each other and receding from each other and sort of figuring it out together that, I mean, I've had a lot of like pre-sex conversations where it's like this is okay, this is not okay. And that's totally fine too, but it's not always like that. And that doesn't necessarily mean someone has violated my consent by like trying something and me adjusting them in the moment or afterwards.
Right. Yeah, totally. A lot of what I like to do when I'm figuring out someone else's body is like, I like to get to a point where I'm like, I want to just do whatever I do. So, and obviously I have to have earned their trust in order to do that. Like, I'm just going to go under the covers right now. Please don't pay attention to me. The best thing would be if you like read a book right now. And I'm just going to explore and do whatever I want. And then you can tell me afterwards, like, what you liked. Obviously, please tell me if I do something that you don't like, and then even before I'm doing that, I'm like, is there anything that I should know? Like anything that I should definitely not do or that you really don't like? But yeah, like that's my favorite thing is like, I'm just going to do what I want to do down here. I'm going to play around, be creative, try things. And then you tell me what's okay and tell me what's not okay. Tell me what's okay. Tell me what's more than okay.
Yeah, it's this thing we talked about. I forget what, I think it was a Jungian thing that I read, but it was like this thing with sex is that like we're using another person for our gratification at times.
Yeah.
Like we're also gratifying them, we're receiving gratification from them, and we're also using them for our gratification, right? And so we have to trust that person has enough of a sense of self to be able to, if I push too much into their self, that they can push back, right?
Right. That's the trust that's cultivated when someone says no to you. Like, and you're talking about the wheel of consent. I mean, there's 4 quadrants on the wheel of consent. There's serving, which means I'm doing something to you for you. There's accepting, which is being served. So like you're doing something to me for me. And that's going to have a certain kind of charge. Like, if you're going down on me for me, then I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to tell you what I like. I'm going to give you direction. But then there's the taking and allowing dynamic where when I'm taking, I'm doing something to you for my pleasure, not for my pleasure. Betty Martin would tell me that's
challenge
wrong.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say slap me on the wrist, but I think she would never.
Unless there was a mosquito.
Yes. No, taking is like, I'm doing something to you for my benefit. And then allowing is letting you do something to me for your benefit. So if I go down on you from the taking quadrant, I'm going down on you because I love that. And I want to do that. It's going to bring me a lot of pleasure. Then I am going to be creative and play and explore. And you maybe get to sit back and surrender a little bit and like witness what I like and what's bringing me pleasure and how I creatively express my desire using your body. And like, yeah, please tell me if I'm doing something that doesn't feel good, but it may be less about you giving direction and feedback in the moment and more about you getting to witness my desire for you. And you may also in that dynamic learn new things that you like because you're letting me take the reins.
Right. And maybe it will shift. Right? And then I'll be like, I actually, this is so lovely. I'm getting really aroused. And now I want to focus on, I would like to have an orgasm. Let's make this about me. Do you know what I mean? But keep like, you're still giving, right?
I mean, I recently learned something that makes me come that I didn't know makes me come because I let someone else do whatever the hell they wanted to me.
Yeah.
And then I made sounds I've never heard come out of my mouth.
Was this recently?
Yeah, it was last week.
Ugh. Lord almighty.
I mean, I'm having the most intense orgasms of my entire life. I don't know what is going on. Maybe I'm just like
I know what's going on.
What's going on?
I can't say it. I don't want to. This person is not consented to being on the podcast, but I know what's
no,
going
no,
on.
but it's not even just with her. It's like on my own.
Oh,
Like I think it's like something about, I'm healthier now than I've ever been in my life. Like I'm like more in my body and I'm enjoying being in my body more. I think I used to use sex really as an escape because I was just constantly physically horribly uncomfortable. And then, it was then made worse by the tapeworm that I had. So like now that I weigh more than I've ever weighed, which is like a really healthy thing for me. I've been chronically underweight my whole life and malnourished and all this stuff. And so I've been wondering if it's that. I've been wondering if it's like I'm you know, uh that I was on T for like 6 weeks. I'm like, I don't know, did that change some path neural whatever? Like maybe. I'm surprised that would like have continued like months after like not being on it anymore.
you're like
I don't know.
millimeter of bottom growth has just like
Yeah,
shifted.
right. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I've been having like longer, more intense orgasms than I've ever had in my entire life at 34 years old, solo and partnered.
Mia, I have terrible news. I have to go because I have a client call in
But
90
I'm talking
seconds.
about
I know.
orgasm.
And this is all I want this podcast to just to be us talking about sex. So this is great for me, but I
Okay,
have to
well,
go.
next time. Okay, yeah, I have to go to take my dog to the dog park.
I love you.
I love you too. So glad we did this. I'll
All
see you
right.
very soon. Bye.